Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of the resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. And Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks. Mr. Speaker, last night the Rules Committee met and reported a rule, House Resolution 524, providing for consideration of 3 measures, H.Res. 461, H.R. 3799, and H.R. 3564. The rule provides for consideration of H.R. 3564 under a structured rule, with 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Financial Services or their designee. The rule makes in order 4 amendments and provides 1 motion to recommit. The rule additionally provides for consideration of H.R. 3799 under a structured rule with 80 minutes of general debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committees on Education and Workforce or their respective designees, and the Ways and Means or their respective designees. The rule makes in order 3 amendments and provides 1 motion to recommit. Finally, the rule provides for consideration of H.Res. 461 under a closed rule with 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Education and Workforce or their respective designees. Mr. Speaker, I do rise today in support of the rule and in support of the underlying bills. Today, Republican majority continues its long process of reversing and repairing the damages inflicted on the American people by the Biden administration and the previous Democrat majority. Mr. Speaker, included in the rule is H.R. 3799, the Custom Health Option and Individual Care Expense Arrangement Act, or the Choice Arrangement Act, introduced by my friend from Oklahoma, Kevin Hern. The legislation includes common sense changes to help lower health insurance costs, increase competition in the healthcare market, and ensure access to high-quality, low-cost plans for Americans and small business owners and their employees. In 2021, almost 55% of Americans were covered by employer-based health coverage. Employer-based health coverage is easily the most popular option for Americans to receive health insurance coverage. According to the National Federation of Independent Business, of small employers that did not offer health insurance coverage to their employees, 2/3 reported that the reason they do not offer the health insurance is because it is simply too expensive. In 2019, President Trump and his administration published regulations allowing employers to provide their employees with a fixed amount of money each year in tax-preferred individual health coverage reimbursement accounts that an employee could use to buy coverage in the individual market. Current regulations allow employers to establish individual coverage health reimbursement accounts, which employees can use to purchase individual market coverage and pay for their out-of-pocket medical expenses. The Choice Arrangement Act seeks to codify these regulations to provide tax-advantaged funds for employees to buy portable health insurance plans and requires notification to employers of the availability of these tax-advantaged health insurance benefits. The Choice Act arrangement also includes provisions codifying the right of small businesses to coalesce, to band together and form association health plans to offer pooled health insurance coverage to their employees. This legislation will give employers maximum flexibility in how they provide coverage options for their employees by providing choice arrangements while also providing expected benefits like dental plans, vision plans, accident disability benefits, and more. The legislation will also ensure that stop-loss coverage is not subject to federal regulation under the Employee Retirement Income and Security Act. These common sense changes will stop the Biden administration from administratively making health care more expensive by regulating stop-loss coverage and ensuring that small businesses can in fact remain competitive. Mr. Speaker, also included in this rule is HRES 46. This condemns the practice of retrofitting our children's schools to house illegal immigrants. President Biden and Democrats' failures at the southern border are so comprehensive, so overwhelming, that municipalities are now co-opting the schools where we educate our children because President Biden refuses to secure the southern border. Because President Biden will not secure our southern border, Mr. Speaker, our local communities and municipalities are now casualties of President Biden's border crisis. The American people rightfully demand that President Biden and Democrats in Congress acknowledge this crisis. They demand that they not only acknowledge the crisis, Mr. Speaker, they demand that their federal government solve this self-inflicted crisis that is pushing our communities well past the breaking point. New York City and its mayor, Eric Adams, Mr. Speaker, are the first to cry uncle. 2 months, 2 months, Mr. Speaker, that's how long Mayor Adams and New York City lasted, suffering under conditions of a size and scale not even comparable to the conditions that Texans have been enduring these past 2.5 years under an administration that has only now started to pay attention to this humanitarian crisis when it started to affect their constituents. Over and over again, pleading with the Biden administration to take this crisis seriously, only to be rebuffed time and again. This humanitarian catastrophe can be laid squarely at the feet of the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, Secretary Mayorkas, and of course President Biden, who've chosen to do nothing rather than be labeled xenophobes by their progressive colleagues for actually enforcing existing immigration law and securing our southern border. Mr. Speaker, the temptation for the Biden administration has been to bury their heads in the sand and hope that these waves of illegal immigrants across our border will in fact magically disappear. They will not, Mr. Speaker, not until President Biden finally gets serious about the border crisis by demanding that the Secretary of Homeland Security do his job and secure our southern border, or maybe find someone else who can do that job. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the rule provides for consideration of H.R. 3564, the Middle Class Borrower Protection Act of 2023. The bill would repeal the Federal Housing Finance Agency's recalibrated single-family pricing framework to guarantee mortgages, and that would charge borrowers with higher credit scores and larger fees to subsidize borrowers with lower credit scores. If not for our Republican majority, Mr. Speaker, 1 out of every 2 borrowers with higher credit scores would be assessed higher mortgage fees in President Biden's radical equity agenda. President Biden is telling the American people that if you work hard, if you're responsible with your finances, if you pay your bills on time, you're going to get to subsidize the mortgages of those who did not make the same sacrifices that you did in order to attain a higher credit score. This sends a terrible message to the American people. Mr. Speaker, I thank Mr. Davidson for bringing us this vital piece of legislation that underscores how the Republican majority stands with those middle-class families who have done the right thing and should not be pushed by a radical administration that is obsessed with radical wealth distribution schemes. Mr. Speaker, I will reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose the gentleman from